Hello, my name is Jeremy Houck, and I'd like to thank you for making the choice to join us here at the Greenbrier Church Online. There are some things that just don't go together: oil and water, plaid and polka dots, ketchup and pancakes, funerals and Christmas trees. When you lose someone that you love, that you care about, there's obviously pain and loss. The deeper that you love them, the deeper the void is in your life. But it seems that loss and pain are just magnified when you lose someone during the holiday season. Over the past few weeks, this church family has suffered some devastating loss. And personally, and Trista and my family, we've lost some people that we love and care about deeply. And for me, these losses seem to be magnified as I drive around town and I see all the bright and cheery lights and the Christmas trees that have already been set up and decorated. It's just another reminder that death has taken its toll, and having to say goodbye while people are making plans for Thanksgiving dinner and putting up their Christmas lights, it just seems to add to the feelings of loss. I've told you over and over how much I love and even need this time of the year. I need the space and the time to think about and to count all the ways that God has blessed me. I need to take some time to be grateful so that I can grow closer to God. And especially this time of the year when I'm struggling so much with caskets and poinsettias and turkey dinners, we need to take some time to remember one more thing that we have to be thankful for. In Matthew chapter 9, we read that a synagogue official is dealing with his own depression and grief because his daughter has just passed away. This man's life has been interrupted in the worst possible way. And he's been hearing people talk, and not just a few people. It seems that everybody in town is talking about this upstart rabbi who has developed quite a following. And there are all these wild rumors going around about this teacher out of Nazareth. Some people are talking about the debates that this rabbi has had with the scribes and the Pharisees. They say he's not fallen for a single trap. They've thrown their best arguments at him. And the way that he answers their questions is amazing. And it's almost as amazing the fact that he constantly leaves them speechless. I mean, think about it. He actually leaves the scribes and the Pharisees speechless. Other people have told stories about his teaching. There's this talk and this rumor going on around town about this sermon out on the mountain that was so amazing. His words are like nothing else we've ever heard before. He's not like our teachers who are just parroting and repeating the same things they heard from Rabbi Hamal or Rabbi Shammai. Other people are telling stories about all of these miracles. They say that he's fed 4,000, 5,000 men with just a few loaves of bread and some dried fish. They're saying he stopped storms that were raging on the sea. And there are even these stories about people being healed from diseases that have plagued them for years. Men born blind can now see. People are being cured of their leprosy. There's even a rumor out there that he raised a boy in Nain, a widow's only son, came back from the dead. And if those rumors are true, then maybe, just maybe, and the synagogue leader goes to Jesus in his desperation and he pours out his heart. His love and his distress drives him to Jesus, and he gets to Jesus and falls down on the ground in front of him and says, "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her and she will live." In my very limited experience here on this earth, death has always had the final word. Before death, we have the ability to pray for healing. We can hope the doctors can use their wisdom to find a cure. We can pray that God will provide a miracle. Before we take our final breath, there's always the possibility that something can happen. Yet once somebody's died, there's no use in praying anymore. There's no hope for a miraculous healing. Death is the end of the sentence. Death is the period. But here in Matthew 9, we see this dad, this synagogue official, desperately grasping for hope and going to the only one who can provide the hope that his soul is desperately longing for. This synagogue official believed that as long as we have Christ, then sickness that leads to death or death itself is not the end. He believed that in Christ there's hope, and that hope causes this man to ask Jesus for something that defies all nature and common sense. He says, Jesus, can you put a comma where there had only been a period before? That's why today, as we finish talking about what we're thankful for, I want to remind you that we can be grateful for the hope that we have in Jesus. Most people understand hope as wishful thinking, as in, I hope something will happen. Hope is not just telling yourself that things are going to be great, even when they're not great. Little orphan Annie is a great optimist. While scrubbing the floors in an orphanage, she would sing, "The sun will come out tomorrow." But the truth is, some days the sun doesn't come out. There's nothing wrong with being an optimist. It's a much better way of going through life than being a pessimist. But being an optimist alone won't change the world. Optimism only works on stuff that you can actually control. Hope is different from optimism because the optimist says it's not as bad as you think, and hope says, no, it's really bad. Actually, I don't think it's ever been any worse than it is right now. Yet, in the face of all of this, I still choose to believe. What most of us call hope is not really hope at all, it's just wishful thinking. We say, I hope, in an effort to convince ourselves that something is true, even we know deep down in our hearts that it's not true. I mean, I could grab a low carb, low calorie cookie and hope that it tastes as good as a double stuffed Oreo, but that's never going to happen, no matter how much I hope. There are three kinds of hope in this world. The first one is this wishful hope. This type of hope that a lot of us are going to use around the holidays or after the holidays when we step on the scales. We hope that we were able to maintain our weight, knowing that we ate way too many sweets over the past few weeks. It's just wishful thinking that if you eat a whole pumpkin pie over Thanksgiving and then turn around and eat all of that wonderful Christmas candy, no amount of wishing is going to make those calories not count. It doesn't matter how much you hope it comes true. Then there's an expectant hope, which is a little more than wishful thinking. It comes because I've actually done something and I expect a result. It would be like in the spring that I go out and I get some pots and some potting soil and plant some tomatoes on my back porch. And after I've done all of that work, I would have an expectant hope that in a few months I would be able to harvest some tomatoes. But you know that even expectant hope doesn't always come true. When Trista and I first moved into our home, we planted tomatoes on the back porch. We never got a single tomato. Even though we did all the work, we bought the plants, we watered them, we fertilized them, it was the squirrels that were able to enjoy the benefit of my labor. I had this expectant hope, it just never came to pass. But there's a third kind of hope, and it's the hope that we need to cultivate so that we can be thankful. And that is a faithful hope. This is not wishing, this is not expecting. This type of hope is knowing for certain, believing deeply. The Hebrew writer says in Hebrews 11, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Faith and hope go together. You can't have faith without hope, and you can't have hope without a deep faith. If there's nothing to hope for, there's nothing to believe. In the 8th chapter of Job, one of Job's friends comes to visit him. Now, you know the story of Job. You know, Job has lost almost everything at this point. He's lost his children, his cattle, his servants, some property. He's in deep despair. He's sitting on a pile of ashes, scraping his boils with broken pieces of pottery. And in an effort to console him, Bildad, his friend, gives this long and lengthy speech, and he begins to talk about all the things that are wrong in the world. And in his speech, there's this one little phrase that I think kind of sums up everything that's happening in our world and culture today. In Job 8:13, he says, "The same thing happens to all who forget God. The hope of the godless dies." The Living Bible says, "Those who forget God have no hope." The truth of that statement is seen over and over again. The further we get away from God, the less hope we possess. But the opposite of that is true as well. The closer that we get to God, the more faith we have, the more hope we have. The most hopeful people on this earth are the ones who are living the closest to God. Yet for some reason, we tend to place our hope in all these other things. We want to put our hope in politics or in our 401ks or in our health. And it's not that we haven't intentionally chosen to drift away from God, we just forget about Him and drift. When we lived in Texas, I was friends with this guy who worked for the Texas Wildlife Department. Brad was a wonderful Cajun guy who grew up on the waters and the backwoods and the bayous. And every now and then, he would take me out into the bayou so we could do a little fishing. And while Brad had this wonderful little flat bottom boat with a long tail engine, he preferred to drift. His preferred method of fishing was to just set out on the water and go wherever the current would take you, which means if you found this little spot where you'd caught a couple fish, you weren't going to be there long. Brad never used an anchor. We were always at the mercy of the current. The Hebrew writer says this hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls that leads us through the curtain into God's inner sanctuary. When we have a faithful hope, we have an anchor that gives us security. The Hebrew writer says that a faithful hope is a strong, trustworthy anchor that anchors you in difficult times. Your faith is what keeps you from drifting when the currents want to push you away from God. Your faith is what anchors your life when you have to drive by Christmas decorations on your way to the cemetery. If you want to have a truly abundant life, you're going to need an anchor because I can guarantee you that you are going to have storms in this life. There are going to be financial, moral, ethical storms. And for some strange reasons, when these storms come into our life, we tend to look everywhere else for our security and safety. When life gets tough, when people are in pain or depressed, they want to anchor at the bottom of a bottle or at entertainment or in an affair or a vacation or some retail therapy. We tell ourselves, if I could just get a boyfriend or a new job or a new adventure, then we'll be able to make it through this storm. But what happens, and it always happens, is that when we are anchored in anything else than God, we find that we'll run aground or get smashed against the rocks. Now, you've probably already thought of this. But cars don't need anchors. Trains don't need anchors. Wagons don't need anchors. Anchors are only useful for boats because boats are made to float on top of the water, and water is completely unstable. There's nothing in the water that you can fasten to that will hold you secure. The smallest breeze or pebble will ruin the peace and cause water to become unstable. Our lives are like those boats. There's so much brokenness in this world that causes us to be tossed back and forth on the waves. Our lives are often racked with uncertainty, brokenness, pain, and loss. But God has offered us an anchor of hope that will allow us to be steady and secure. We have already been given everything we need to develop a hope in Jesus Christ that will hold us steady during the storms of life. As we get ready to make our way to the tables today, I want us to take a moment to focus on the hope found in the emblems. We read in Matthew 26 that during the meal, Jesus took and blessed the bread, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. Take, eat, this is my body. Taking the cup and thanking God, he gave it to them. Drink this, all of you. This is my blood, God's new covenant poured out for the many people for the forgiveness of sins. I'll not be drinking wine from this cup again until that new day when I drink it with you in the kingdom of my Father. When Jesus established this memorial, he wanted us to see it not only as a celebration of the forgiveness that he offers us at the cross, but also a time to think about the hope that's possible through the resurrection. The table reminds us that Jesus has already won the victory over death and pain and separation. And it gives us hope that one day he will return in victory. The table keeps us focused on the cross. It draws us into fellowship with God in the body of Christ. It gives us the hope of the resurrection and a promise of victory over Satan and sin. As you get together with your family this week to celebrate Thanksgiving, I pray that you have a wonderful time. And I pray that as you get together, you will be able to be thankful for a couple things. I want you to be able to be thankful for your family. I want you to be able to be thankful for your church. I want you to be able to be thankful for the pain that God uses to call you back to his heart. And I want you to be thankful for the hope that exists in the faithfulness of loving and following Jesus Christ, who made this table possible. I hope you have a wonderful week, that you remember how deeply that you're loved. And I look forward to seeing you very soon.